So today we will start with the indirect arc furnace. So, so as the name suggests, and we have already learned that indirect means that there would be no current flowing through the charge. So structure roughly can be drawn like this, that this would be a cylindrical shape cell, something like this, and through which from one side, from the two sides, the electrode would be passed, and across the electrode the arc would be created. Of course, this here the arc is shown by a big exaggeration, and at the bottom of this there would be a charge. Let's say in molten state. Need not be in the molten state, so that the heat is passed to the charge by the process of radiation from the arc, and due to that the charge gets heated up, and that melts after certain time or in due course. Okay. Now, due to the structure and further, this being an indirect furnace or indirect heating process, so there being no current passing through the charge, so the inherent stirring action which is there for the direct process of heating, that would not be here. So we require some sort of I would say some sort of mechanism such that the charge can be stirred. So this stirring action is okay. So this stirring action is done by using the tilting mechanism. If you remember, in case of the in the last class we discussed about the direct arc furnace, where we require the tilting mechanism such that we can remove, or we can actually take out the charge, molten charge from there. So, however, here the process or the requirement is different, that we require that absolutely, if we could have some mechanism such that we can take out the charge somehow from the direct arc furnace, we usually don't require that tilting action to be there. Okay. However, here the tilting action is required, both of course for taking out the charge, molten charge, and for the this tilting action provides the stirring action also. So if this is the cross sectional area, of course here I have shown the sail of the furnace to just by a line. Of course that should not be like that. That should be a thick. The sail of the furnace is very thick and made of some first refractory in some similar, very simple brick lining sort of thing, and then there would be the usually for a very high temperature molybdenum silicide, that sort of disilicide, that sort of materials are used. Now due to the process that there is no heat, sorry, there is no current passing through the charge and there is no stirring action, the structure of the indirect arc furnace is dictated by that relations or that nature also. So the structurally this is cylindrical. The furnace shape is cylindrical. Next is that we require the stirring action. Of course, the next point is that we require the stirring action to be provided, and of course, due to that, this is made cylindrical. Everything here is interrelated. That is made cylindrical, and further, this is usually or not usually the indirect arc furnace is always either single phase or we may have DC supply also. So it cannot be three phase, because if you consider a three phase structure, you can, if you arrange them symmetrically, that should form a triangle sort of thing. And for the if you consider the structure drawn here, the any in any way the third or the upper phase, the arc produced by the upper phase, the heat generated by the upper phase, that would not be passed to the charge. That heat, of course, would heat up the inner lining of the inside structure, inside wall of the furnace, and that would be detrimental for the life of the furnace. So due to that, the indirect arc furnace is always single phase in nature, and of course that can be DC also. So further, because that is cylindrical, so the indirect, if you the for the single phase structure, we can have the electrode passed at the center, through the center of the cylinder, which may not be possible if you consider three phase, so or multi-phase system. So in phase system, that would be a bit I would say there would be a bit offset, which would dictate, or which would make the arc to be near or nearer to the charge, okay, which would be beneficial in case of, or which would be better in case of a single phase or DC system. Now, as we have here, of course, the heat is passed from the arc to the furnace. Now, arc to the from the arc to the charge. Okay, someone is entering. So, and heat, of course, heat from the arc would, of course, once again, even for the single phase system, that would be passed to the, when if you consider that at the bottom there is the charge, and the charge is heating up, it get the receiving the heat, and on the other side, if there is no charge, so that means the inner wall, even for a single phase system, that would receive heat. Now, to that, of course, once again, here also that would produce that would create a problem for the life of the furnace. So for that, the tilting action creates or helps further, that due to the tilting action, usually, and due to the tilting action, the charge would pass, or the charge would move on the inner surface, over the inner surface of the furnace. Now, due to that, once the charge gets molten, so that would as if that would create a layer, form a layer of charge over the furnace's inner lining, and that would help, that would of course restrict the direct heating from the arc to the inner lining of the furnace. So, but due to so you see that everything is interrelated. That means we require because there is no stirring action, we have to create the stirring action. For that, the structure need to be cylindrical, and that is to be the power supply is to be single phase, and we require the stirring action that actually helps for that inner to increase or to reduce the detrimental effect of the heating to the inner lining, inside lining of the furnace. So all these making the tilting action or the stirring action, I would say, mandatory for the structure, or for the indirect arc furnace. This arc furnace is usually called rocking arc furnace. So because is this the operation of the furnace require that it should be continuously rocked or continuously tilted. So that's why this is called sometimes the rocking arc furnace. So now, to give you some idea, the tilting or the rocking need to be very big, because of course for the direct arc furnace we need the tilting. However, that has always I would say special purpose, that is not mandatory for the operation, normal operation of the direct arc furnace. Here the tilting mechanism or tilting is very large, and that tilting may be of the order of starting from 20 degree to 160, 170 degree. So almost 360 degree or complete rocking is required. Okay. So so that is the reason this is called the rocking arc furnace. So that's all about the direct and indirect arc furnace, or the complete arc furnace. Otherwise, the rest of the things, if you remember about the electrode position control, the maximum power transfer, the control of voltage and current, everything is valid here. We need the length of the arc to be controlled, such that otherwise there can be require, if the length of the arc is increased, we require higher voltage to be applied. Of course, here also the voltage is low, current is high, very similar to the case of direct arc furnace. So here also we require the electrode position need to be controlled, electrodes need to be moved. Here, of course, here, because the two electrodes are from two sides, both the electrodes need not be moved. One electrode can be moved, or other electrode can be kept fixed. However, both of them can, if you in some cases, or both of them can be moved also. So, that's all about the indirect arc furnace. Let's move to the. So this was up to this was the heating process by the power frequency, where we don't actually usually require or usually change the frequency. So all these works at 50 hertz or so. So we don't actually usually we don't require some conversion mechanism there. Of course, if we convert to DC, or we require sometimes we require the DC, usually that need to be converted by using a rectifier system, or if we have a generator sort of thing. So in that case, we don't require the conversion. We require the conversion in the sense of the mechanical to electrical power. However, of course, that is not a conversion for this class here. So let's move on, and this would be for the different frequency or usually high frequency, need not be high frequency. However, high frequencies are better. I would say, not better. Of course, you have an application of higher frequency here. So one of them is induction heating, and another is dielectric heating. Hopefully, not hopefully, we will discuss both of them and complete today. So in induction heating, we can, let's say, so let's consider this is a portion of a metal structure, and over there we would put another winding, let's say like this. We will pass some current I through this, and let's say the length of the piece here is L, and the number of turns is N. And further, for this class, let's consider that this has a diameter of T. Now, due to the transformer action, there would be a voltage induced across the piece, and due to that, remember here for the induction heating, we need not have a complete circuit here across the secondary. So if we can consider the number of turns N, and carrying a current I is the primary of the transformer, the secondary is the metal piece. However, this need not be a complete circuit, creating a complete circuit. This, if you look here, this is a part of the metal piece. So as such, there is no chance of passing or chance of current here. However, remember we have something called eddy current. So if we have this sort of a structure, and there is rate of change of frequency, we would have some eddy current passing through the structure or core of the metal piece here, shown by the diameter D and length, let's say L. So due to that, there would be a current passing through that structure, and so that is a complete formation, like the complete formation. So that current would produce, the eddy current would produce a I square, a loss inside the core of the material, and due to that there would be heating, and that would help something called localized heating. So of course, if we can have something a complete structure here of the secondary material or secondary, let's say, metal body, so in that case the transformer action is very clear, and there would be current passing through that, and that would produce some heat due to I square R loss. However, that current need to be that either that would be used, that can be used to I would say create the heat in that case, because if the secondary is generating the heat, and yeah, that heat is utilized to melt the secondary itself, so that would be direct resistance heating, because the current is passing, although the current is passed by the induction process, although that should be called, I would say, that should be called a direct resistance heating. Other than that, if here, of course, the current is of course produced by the induction. However, that is not due to the I square R loss as such. Okay, so eddy current completely is due to the induction process, and due to that eddy current, if there would be I square R loss, and that due to that this can be heated up. So this should be called induction heating. Now we would go, of course, go into that. However, look here, we can heat up the metal piece here. We can heat up the metal piece here. So this can be used to have something called localized heating. If you want to heat some part, a very small part of the metal, so in that case, this should help. This should help increase, or this should help to uh, heat up that part of the metal. You just put some length of somewhere a number of times over the metal piece and pass some certain current. Due to that, there would be heat produced, and that heat would be localized heat due to the eddy current here. Now, remember, so now remember here, of course, the secondary need to be the conductor of electricity. Otherwise, we cannot have the eddy current, and we cannot have the heat produced. Now we would deduce how much heat would be produced here. Let's for that. First thing we would consider is the skin depth, that is represented by this delta. So, and that is given by, let's try, this is the skin depth, that is equals to, you can find, I think you know the relationship, that is just 10 to the power 7. Then rho is the resistivity, then R into frequency. So this is a known formula. So as the frequency increases, so there would be less and less amount of current passing through the core of the material. So as the current would be restricted on the outer tail, or outer part of the conductor, that is called the skin of the conductor. So, and further, as the resistivity increases, the skin depth of the current distribution increases. Okay, so our current distribution becomes better. Now further, this is one information we require. Now for the skin effect, let me draw the structure here once. Okay. The path of the eddy current. Let's Okay, let me try once again. This is very bad drawing. So this can represent. I hope this can represent a cell of the cell representing the skin depth. So as if we have taken the up to the skin depth, we have taken out the cell and separated the cylinder sort of thing through which the eddy current passes. So the passage of eddy current is the eddy current. If you remember the secondary, let's say the secondary eddy current, this is the I2 passing like this for certain instant of or for certain cycle of the current. For the rest of for other cycle, other half of the current, the eddy direction of the eddy current of course would change. However, this current would flow through this circular sort of thing, cylinder sort of thing, right? Cylindrical through this circular path. Now, what is the length or what is the thickness of this path? That is the delta, and the length of this path, of course, if you consider the length of this path, that would be equals to pi uh, into d. That is the diameter of the metal piece here. And further, of course, we need to consider, we are considering here that delta is very small compared to d. Otherwise, we need to take into account delta by 2. So the length of diameter would be d, capital D minus delta by 2, that sort of thing. However, okay, we can do away with this. And the length of the cylinder here, that is the length. Here, so this is the length of the metal piece, and this is the length L. So I hope you can visualize the eddy path of the eddy current through which that is flowing, and due to that, what would be the, we would deduce what would be the amount of heat produced due to that. Okay. So let's consider that the number of turns n for the primary is n, number of turns is n for the primary, and the current passing through the primary is current I. Now, due to that, the eddy current produced, let's say that is equals to I2. And what is the number of turns? That number of turns is naturally that would be equals to 1. So we have the information that eddy current, that would be equals to I2 would be equals to N into I divided by the MMF balance equation. Now, what is the power produced? Power, that would be, that is equals to I2 square into the resistance of the path. So this is the eddy current, and due to the path resistance R2, there will be I square R heat generated, and that would provide the heat, or that would actually heat up the metal piece or the charge here. So I2 is equals to N into I, so this whole square into R2. So R2 is equals to rho, and the length here, length of the material here, and divided by the area. So if we go back to the last slide, so So length here is the uh, length of the path. That length of the path is pi into d, and the thickness of the path is delta, and the length of the thickness of the path is delta, and the length further on the other side is L. So the area for the eddy current passing through the total area, if you consider here as if the current eddy current I is entering here and coming from coming out of this, the eddy current is coming out of this. So okay, so let me simplify. So eddy current is coming out of this. So the cross section area for the current through is the cross section area through which the current is passing is the rectangle, one side of which is delta and other side of that is the length small l. Okay, and the length of the path for the eddy current, the path traversed by the eddy current is capital L, that is equals to pi into d. So the heat produced is equals to n square into I. Okay, so n square into I square, and this is rho, this and L, capital L equals to pi into d divided by the area equals to delta into L. Now, okay, let's simplify this. Let's consider power per unit area. So any unit area of the material. So that is the power. That's the if we want the piece to be further the heat to be further utilized. So that is the amount of heat that would be passed through the surface of the material. So that is at steady state, that would be the heat produced. So this is equals to P by A, power per unit area. So that is equals to pi, and area of the surface is equals to for the cylinder, that would be equals to pi into diameter of the material and diameter of the cylinder into length. So this is equals to P, we already know that is equals to, okay, let's do this way, 1 by pi d into length into P equals to n square into I square, and we have the rho pi into d divided by delta, okay, divided by delta into L. And here we can remove the delta and replace the by its equivalent value, that would be equals to twice pi. We have the delta equals to 1 by twice pi. So 1 by, we actually putting the 1 by delta value, that is, oops, sorry, that divided by, oops, this is equal to into f divided by 10 to the power 7 into rho. Okay. So let's remove some parts. So here we have delta going out and pi, sorry, pi and pi to be removed. So we would be left with, so the relationship comes to be n square into I square divided by L square into twice pi rho big square root mu r into f divided by 10 to the power 7 into rho. So this is equals to twice pi. Now, if you want, you can write this Ni by L, Ni by L, that is equals to the magnetic field intensity. So we can put it here, otherwise you can leave this like this, that's not a problem. So twice pi h square and square root of mu r into f into rho divided by 10 to the power 7. result comes to be, let's say, because 10 to the power 7 twice pi is a constant, 10 to the power 7 is a constant, so we can write this as some constant into h square. You can keep this as 2 m square I square by L square, and for the this is mu r into f into rho. So here you see, as frequency increases, so the power loss or power heat generated, that will also increase. So of course that is proportional to square root of that. And another thing is that as the resistivity increases, the heat generated also increases. Now the problem is that of course as the resistivity increases, the current passing through the structure, that would also reduce. So this resistivity is, we should not consider that to be an independent quantity that you change the resistivity. Of course, given a material, once a material is given, so we cannot change the resistivity. So in that sense, the resistivity is constant. Otherwise, if given a chance of changing the resistivity, you should not play with that, because if you change the resistivity, that would change the current also. So that is not completely independent. Here we have the independent, or we can change something. That is our most important part, is that changing the frequency. So for the lower frequency, the heat generated for the same structure, the heat generated will be lower, and as we increase the frequency, that we can change, or we can increase the heat generated. So of course we have induction heating furnace at the power frequency or 50 hertz 50 hertz operation. So and that structure is not small. Usually you can sometimes you can find the induction furnace of, let's say, structure with a 1 megawatt or so power generation capability operating at 50 hertz. Now, the problem with this is that as we go on increasing the frequency, of course, the power increases, power generated, power converted, that increases. However, we need to have the current capability, current passing capability, or current carrying capability of the circuit, which at higher power may not be adequate or may not be available at this point of time, or let's say at for the last few years, if you consider, because the heating process as such, this has very good amount of history. So that sort of thing was not there. Nowadays, of course, those are coming into picture slowly, not very slowly. However, heating process with higher frequency, that we can have heating process, we can have higher frequency. To give you some idea, we can have uh, uh, let's say 500 hertz to 1 kilohertz, that can be of the order of, let's say, 50 kilowatt, so a bit smaller. And however, for further higher frequency, let's say of the order, when the frequency goes to megahertz range, the capacities of the heat produced or heating capacity of the furnace, that also increases. And you can see the we can find the furnaces with high utilizing those range of frequency to have heating capability of, let's say, of the order of few hundreds of kilowatts, right? Of course, that need not go to megawatt level. So here we have the chance, or here we have the choice selecting for a given furnace. We have the choice. We need to select the frequency, range of frequency, or operating frequency. So for that, we need to take into account the thickness of the surface thickness of the material to be heated. As for higher frequency, we can only heat we can only heat a very small outer part of the charge. We cannot heat the core of the charge. Of course, depending upon the time as the structure melts, of course, once again you see that would become thicker and thicker. So we need to take into account the frequency. For the how long the operation would be continued this sort of way, and the temperature, what temperature need to be generated, that sort of thing need to be taken into account while producing, or while going for selection of the frequency for the induction furnace. So these high frequencies are created by something you have already studied, the inverter system, because this, of course, here that need to be complete AC. However, yeah, these are usually generating some sort of resonating circuit where actually because the current for the primary can be very high, because for the secondary, even if you now increase the because the secondary current is very high, even if you increase the number of turns of the primary, the current can be very high. So usually for the primary, the conductor is usually hollow conductor through which the water is passed, such that due to the, even if there is I square or loss for the primary, that can be kept, the conductor can be cooled down. So here for the induction furnace, we have two types of induction furnace of you need to study. That is, one is called core type induction furnace and another is called core-less induction furnace. So uh, if you have any question, you can ask me. Please interrupt and ask. So for the core type furnace, you can consider as if, let's draw a structure. I compiled a very small notes last year because there was no class as such. So I needed, okay, so you can consider as if, so this is the primary, and for the secondary, the core actually as if, let's say there would be some sort of, let's consider, please try to visualize as if we are taking the cross section area. So here there would be charge. So the total electrical power is passed through the magnetic power or effect of the core, through the magnetic effect of the core. So over the core structure, there would be this sort of the furnace or the hearth would be created, and there the charge would be put, and due to the flux passing through the core, there would be voltage induced, and due to that, there would be eddy current through the core, through the charge, and that produces the uh, heat. Now, one example of this, and that is very important, is called the Ajax Watt furnace. So we will not discuss here. That is simply a structure of the furnace, because theory is one thing and application or utilizing that for a large power generation, that is another thing. So that is the difference between science and engineering. So you can find the structure of this very easily. So this is the, you can find a question on describing the operation of the Ajax Watt furnace in some years. Okay. So you please find that and study that. And for the coal loss furnace, so we can have, usually we have a something called, or something like this. Let's say this is the furnace structure, and there the charge would be, okay. So let's use. So over on the side of the furnace, we would have the conductors put, and through the conductors the current would be passed, and there would be charge inside this. So this is core type induction heating, and this is core-less induction heating. So there is no core directly. Of course, the electric current or electric power is passed to the charge by the induction process. However, there is no core. So in here, you need to study the Ajax Watt furnace structure. Now let's move to the last part of the electrical heating, that is the dielectric heating. This is also one example of high frequency heating. So here also we have, because this is an induction, this is high frequency heating process. So we require the selection. Once again, we have the uh, the frequency selection becomes important here. So for this, let's draw a phasor diagram here. let's say voltage is applied across a capacitance. So due to that, the current passed through the capacitance is I. So that would have, and this is a lossy capacitance. So the current would have two components. One is the IC, which is the perpendicular, which is perpendicular to that, orthogonal to the direction of the voltage, and another producing the loss, that is the IR component. So for a lossy capacitance, of course, this is the power factor angle. Let's say this is theta or phi, and this part is the special quantity, that is called the delta. And that, or the tan delta is the heat producing part. Oh, sorry, that tan delta is the lossy part which creates the loss. Okay, so let's discuss. So power produced for this lossy capacitance, this is equals to VI, let's say cosine theta. So this is equals to V into, we can represent that is V into IR. So we can also write IR is the IC tan delta. So this is equals to V into IC into tan delta. Now, even for a very bad capacitance, the delta is usually very small if you consider from the trigonometric point of view. So in that case, we can simplify this as V into IC into delta. So now what is IC? IC is equals to V into omega into the capacitance. So this becomes equals to V square omega into capacitance into delta. Now omega is of course the applied frequency. Now let's consider the capacitance to be a parallel plate capacitance. So this becomes equal to V square omega C equals to epsilon naught epsilon R, the area of the plate divided by the distance between the plates and multiplied by delta. Okay. Now, okay. So here you can find several things: power per unit volume, power per unit area. Several things you can find in the Partha book. Otherwise, here, okay, let's do this exercise. So let's write this V square by D square into A into D. I hope I'm not making any mistake. Otherwise, please uh, interrupt. So omega is a variable. So what are the constants here? Constant. Okay, let's write omega, because omega is equals to twice pi f. So frequency is a variable, and we have the constant in terms of twice pi epsilon naught epsilon, and this is a constant. And we have another part which is also a constant. However, that is a property of, that is the property of the material. So sometimes that is called dielectric factor, epsilon naught in epsilon r into delta. So this is equals to the V square by D square is the electric field square, and A into D is the volume of the material, that is the dielectric inside, which is which gets affected due to the heat produced, heat generated, and there will be increase in the temperature. So rest part is the one part is some constant, and this is a dielectric factor epsilon naught into delta, property of the dielectric material. So you see there will be due to even the dielectric, if you remember, the dielectric material usually is a non-conductor of electricity, or the insulator of insulating material, usually insulating material, not usually, that those are insulating material. So by using this sort of heating, we can actually heat up some sort of insulating material. Now remember, usually insulator of electricity is also insulator of heat. That means that insulator of, I should rephrase this, insulator of electricity is non-conductor of heat. So that does not actually passes the heat. So using this, we can also, because this is a electric field dependent. You can see here, this is electric field dependent. So given a voltage, and that is differentiated by a distance. So we have an electric field, and that is more or less that is same throughout the structure. So we can have a uniform heating throughout the structure, even if that is non-conductor of heat, and of course insulator for the electricity. So by using this dielectric heating, we can heat up insulating material. And further, of course, here we have the problem of selecting the frequency, like very similar to the induction heating. As you can see, as we increase, okay, sorry, I forgot to in the last equation, the frequency term is missing. If you increase the frequency, the dielectric heating or power generated, that would also increase. Now, dielectric heating is not I would not say usually. Dielectric heating is never used at low frequency. Now, you would say dielectric heating, or you probably have seen dielectric heating, that is in your microwave home microwave oven. So not the OTG oven. You have the convection oven or the microwave oven. So there you have the microwave generator, and inside your microwave oven there is a microwave generator or high frequency generator. That is a standard part that is called magnetron. You can check, you can Google that. That is a very and that is a very, I would say, very some structure which actually traps the electron and produces vibrate or oscillates, it creates the oscillation of the electrons at a very high frequency by a mechanical structure. That is not a complete, or taking into account the electrical effect, of course. So that produces a very high frequency of the order of few megahertz. Now, due to that, the dielectric heating, there will be dielectric heating, and you can consider as if the food inside or the part material put inside the microwave oven is the dielectric medium or dielectric material which is heated up. Now, to give you the history about dielectric heating, the people actually, this was other type of heating came naturally into the electrical system. However, the dielectric heating was an invention by the sheer, physical sheer observation of certain human. I forgot the name. He was actually working for some telescope, or not telescope, for some what is that called, the radar telescope, something telescope sort of thing. So I actually don't remember. Probably he was a NASA engineer or so, some, or working for some observatory like that. So he had a chocolate in his pocket. However, during that was a cold day, and after working for certain duration on the telescope surface, there was some there was some problem, and he was working on the surface of the telescope. So he found that the chocolate melted. So this was not possible due to the or heat of the day, or due to the sunlight, because that was a very cold day. So he tried to find the source of heat, and discovered the process of heating by the microwave. Okay, so from that, the dielectric heating or microwave heating actually came into picture in very early days. That was for the very industrial use, and that actually that cost that the price of that was very high. Now, after around 70s, the microwave oven came into picture for personal use, or for the usage of for the use by the people. And nowadays we can have the dielectric heating or the microwave oven at our household, probably at a very low cost. At not a very low cost, however, at the lower cost. Now, what is the how can we select, or what is the restrictions, or what is the point to remember while selecting the frequency? Now, one point here that for dielectric heating we require high voltage because this is a capacitive heating, and we need to we need to apply voltage such that there is a certain amount of current through the capacitance formed. So due to that, we require a high voltage to be applied across the dielectric, across the capacitor plates of the capacitor. Now, to select the for selecting the frequency, one point is that we need to take into account that the frequency should not be related, so related such that the wavelength of the applied frequency or applied wave is not integral multiple of the time or distance between the two plates. Otherwise, the frequency or that frequency can create a standing wave. So if there is a standing wave created, that means if you can consider as if the two zeros of the standing wave are at the two zeros of the standing wave is fixed to physical points of the dielectric, and the peak of the frequency or peak of the waveform is also fixed on inside the dielectric physical point inside the dielectric. So that means the voltage across the dielectric, that would be changing, that would not remain constant as you move to inside the dielectric. At certain point there will be voltage zero, the voltage increases, then once again the voltage would come down, and you will find a voltage zero somewhere. So due to that, the power produced at different point of the dielectric would be different. So due to that, there will be localized heating and localized localized cool point and localized hot point inside the dielectric. So the heat produced would not be uniform. So due to that, there should not be any chance of formation of the standing wave between the two electrodes, where the wavelength is nearly equal or more than around one quarter of the wavelength of the particular frequency. Okay. Now, of course, we need to take into account the other factors such as communication, because we are considering that the frequencies of the order of 2 megahertz. Now, usually would be communication bandwidth which would operate at the megahertz level. So the frequency produced by the dielectric or the microwave or the dielectric heating should not interfere with the communication band. So due to that, the microwave frequency usually is limited to some band, and you would find there is a global, I would say, advisory on the range of the frequency to be used for the microwave heating. And for the microwave heating or the microwave oven we use at our household, the frequency is more or less constant in the sense that that is already predefined that you should use some frequency in this range, and that range is already specified. So you can check any standardized book. You will find I actually forgot the frequency, that is around 800 megahertz or so, if I remember properly. I may make mistake. I don't actually remember I don't remember the actual figure. So that is the frequency at which the microwave ovens operate. You cannot use any frequency for that because otherwise that would interfere with the communication band, with the communication channels. Okay, so that's all about our electrical heating. So, we are left with the battery, and I actually I am not interested of the covering the battery. So you just study the battery part. So the battery fundamentals of the battery and the charging of the battery, charging and I would say terminating the charging, the battery chemistry mainly for the lead acid battery, nickel cadmium, lead acid, and the lithium ion batteries. So other than that, we have the UPS. So UPS is a very small syllabus. Very small means that would require around half an hour or so. I would send you a note. So you have the different structures of the UPS in your syllabus. That's all. So if you require a class on battery, we will discuss. Otherwise, you please study the battery material I have sent you.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So thank you. If you have any question, you can ask me in this class, or if you require have several questions in your mind, we can have we can have another classes. Otherwise, you can call me to my number, or you can mail me. Mail is a better medium because I would find some time. I may not be able to answer you when you call me. So if you send me questions by mail, I would surely try to find time to answer you. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.